In this episode, we take a look at the final jobs for ops.
That is the list of trains on the GN 1970.
We start into cleaning up the SW1200, blow apart its trucks, address window glazing that's frosted up, start the assembly process of the SW1200,
and reflect back to why we created 70-plus episodes.
So kick back, roll an axle, and maybe you'll accidentally learn something on this episode of the GN 1970.
70s.
All right, it's time to rescue the SW1200, and I start with a product called Super Clean. It's a mild detergent that will help remove paint, so you do want to be careful. You let it sit too long, it'll attack your logos and your stripes and other stuff on the freight car, but it won't attack the actual base paint. Now, I do put a couple of weights in the container just so I don't use as much product, and then I let it sit for about 20 minutes. After that time is up, I start scrubbing with a soft bristled toothbrush to try to remove that top layer of dull coat. And what kind of a success did I see? Well, here are the results. Not what I'm looking for, so I pivot to the solution that I've always had success with, and that has been...
Tamiya accent washes?
Oh, come on.
You'd put that on your taco if you could.
Well, I've had great success with this product in a lot of different applications, and I'm willing to throw anything at it when I can. Now, here's a combination I shared in the past about using the colored pencils with the accent washes. I'm going to use this approach when moving forward with the SW1200 to be able to rescue the paint scheme.
Getting to know the GN in 1970. Jobs for ops. Engineers.
All right, here we are looking at the GN in 1970's most important position, and that would be the engineer's role.
I thought you said the dispatcher is the most important position.
As important as the dispatcher is, if you don't have engineers, you don't have trains that move, and if you don't have trains that move, that dispatcher's doing diddly.
I bet diddly's hot.
So we're going to just take a brief overview of the trains that are listed here. I'm going to break it up into a few segments, so we're not going to look at this thing in one big felt swoop. We'll see a few trains in action, as well as just get an overview of what each of the jobs are available for operators that want to be an engineer. Originally numbered X100, then X181, and finally BN11272, this unique bird was created from a 50-foot outside braced wood-sided car, GN29956, in April of 1954. It was built to handle less than carload freight and lasted onto the BN roster until 1982. Do you know what this GN caboose's nickname was? Was it A, Cadillac, B, Hutch, C, Combine, or D, Dutch? We'll find out later in this episode. Now, I'm not hiding any techniques that I had used in this process of saving the SW1200. I did try to use chalks, and I didn't like the results that I was yielding, so I moved on to the AK Interactive Chipping Colored Pencil. This works really well in conjunction with those washes, as I covered in the past. I work over the entire locomotive and just slightly massage in that chalk and colored pencil. And the color of the Tamiya wash that I'm using is dark brown. It's a nice complement to the orange, so I work it over the entire locomotive to try to even things out. Now, as a modeler, you'll never look at this locomotive that close, but you can see all the grit and grime that's taken place on top. I'm using the combination of the wash with that colored pencil. I lay down the colored pencil to be able to bring in a little texture and color. It smooths out that dull coat that had been laid down on top of it, and I wash it again. I repeat the process until I really like the outcome. And as far as the overall locomotive is concerned, I continue to coat the entire thing in the wash. Now note here, the logo and number did get attacked by the Super Clean because it got left on too long. My dad had tried using the Super Clean as well. Well, long story short, it'll get repaired. And the way I end up repairing it, well, simple as decals. I end up pulling out a set of decals that we had on hand, put the logo on, put the number on, and the whole process wasn't flawless in itself because, well, when I laid the 29 on, I didn't really like the size of the 29 over the other 29. So I moved them off, cleaned them off, and then in the end,
Ruined the decals, wiped them off, and ended up putting a new set of number 29 decals.
So, live and learn.
Keep it moving.
and the last set of decals to apply was a number 29 on the back of the cab. And once it was done, well, the cab was pretty much done.
Jobs for ops. Engineers.
Continued.
To start out with the trim jobs, these ones here, they're all handled by each of their own yards. The only area we may assign an engineer would be union yard, and they would run the union trim as well as assist the union guy with any additional work that may be needed. The first train that would leave union would be the local heavy or the local light. It's called the sprint light, and this is just for somebody that if they've never ran the railroad before or are an inexperienced operator, they may take the Sprint Light. We'll have the locals built before the session is ready, so we'll know whether or not that guy will be either in heavy or light mode. The time that it takes to run this particular job, about an hour and a half if you're the Sprint Light, and about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the heavy.
The light takes a little bit longer just for those that don't know the railroad well and are going at a little bit slower pace.
The GN 1970 does have a couple of through freights. These are kind of nice to run because they just run through. They don't stop at the yards. We do this because we want the yard guys an opportunity to be able to sort and classify to get ready for the first train that they're going to have serviced. The potash is the same as 97 and 98. It flip-flops. I believe this one is flip-flopping currently with the Empire Builder or another one of the trains that's on the list. I believe it's the Empire Builder, but
After further review, it's not the Empire Builder.
it's actually Train 51. This is a westbound that doesn't stop anywhere along the line. There is an art to be able to balance what trains are going where at what time, especially for the dispatcher. He's got to be able to balance where trains are coming from and where they're going to go. So you need to open up a track on one end for a train that's leaving on the other. So it's kind of a swapping system. So Train 51 will swap with the potash train. The potash train will either reside in Westminster, which is around the helix, or pull into Union Yard at the end of a session. But as an engineer, you don't have to worry about train management. That's up to the dispatcher. Nonetheless, we do not have 2 potashes. We only have 1. And this one is red just because there is a staging issue because we don't have enough capacity in the staging that this would be normally destined for. Now the chassis didn't avoid the frosty white spray, so I end up using a black Tamiya accent wash to cover the entire chassis to get rid of that frosted look. Now when I said I was going to take you through the entire process, we're looking at everything including blowing apart the trucks. I did clean up the treads to be able to make sure there was nothing on them, and then I started painting the wheel sides. Now there are 8 of them to paint, and it does take a while. I do use an acrylic paint. This is just a flat black by Model Master. That's the part number if you can find the stuff. But as far as the paint is concerned, you just want to make sure you don't get it on the ends of the wheel, so the actual wheel end as well as the axle. And of course, you don't want to paint the wheel treads.
So tread lightly when painting the wheel sides.
Oh, that was a terrible pun.
I do go around and touch the very edge of the wheel to make sure that it's evenly coated in paint, because in the end, this is a nice little accent or touch-up for locomotives, because often it's not done. Now for the side frames, I'm using the black accent wash, and I'm using the accent wash instead of just painting it black because I don't want to just cover up the dull coat that's there. The black accent wash actually moves around some of the material and breaks it down, giving me a better result. The underframe got the same application with the wash, and then I move on to the trucks and getting them ready for dull coating. Now I did take little pieces of blue painter's tape and cover up the journals so there wasn't paint getting into the areas where there are electrical contacts. That is important. As well as protecting the bolster, I do mask off this area to make sure that there's no paint getting in here, because the less stuff that's in there, the better it performs.
Jobs for ops. Engineers.
Continued.
Train 90 dispatch. Yeah, go ahead, Train 90. Yeah, we're just rolling into Litchfield. 10-4, Train 90, rolling into Litchfield. Now the extra, this is out of Sioux City down to Union and back. It does very light switching. Train 154 is the Superior turn. It goes from the Superior line up to Union, back down the Superior line.
Yeah, this is the Hogger on 154 calling dispatch.
Go ahead, 154.
Yeah, we're clear of the main.
All right, 154, clear the main.
The ore trains are kind of fun because they both come out either a loaded and an empty, and they have their power swap. So if it's a eastbound, in this case it's an empty, so it would be heading back up to Superior, and it would have its power swapped out at Union. So it'd come out of Chicago or it'd come out of the east, cuts off the CB&Q power, puts on Great Northern power, and then heads to Superior. And the one from Superior comes down with its GN power and has CBQ power put on it. So it's kind of a fun little swap to do. Train 81 and 82 are our hot freights on the railroad. They get the most work. They're pretty busy because they are big, long trains on both east and west staging. They occupy an entire track. So that is something to kind of keep an eye out for. When those trains are coming, you're going to have a lot of cars you're dumping or you're going to be getting. The Farstead turn, as we move along here, is a great little job to have because it's a coal train that runs from the west down to the Farstead power plant and then back up to the west end. So it's going to have loadeds coming down and empties going back. The Hutch Local. This is the one that runs from Hutchinson to Lyndale and then back to Hutchinson. In reality, the real train ran Lyndale to Hutch and then Hutch to Lyndale, but we've split it in such a way that our staging is allowing a track to be able to have the Hutch line, and this train comes online and is able to go back offline and not clog up Lyndale Yard.
So the Hutch job is a nice little local to run.
Here's a 10-second tip.
Take blue painter's tape, invert it
Sticky side out.
on a piece of Runby material to be able to hold onto a shell of a locomotive or freight car for easier dull coating and painting. With the time to dull coat, I'm going to be using Krylon ColorMax Clear. I've had great success with this. I've mentioned it in the past. I've used it on Tangent, Exact Rail, Athearn, Scale Trains, Intermountain, you name it. I've had great success, but thin coats go a long way, and make sure you shake that can.
I can't believe he's using a spray bomb on a locomotive that he just frosted white.
I can't stress enough how light coats go such a long way. I ended up putting 3 coats on the locomotive: the long hood, cab, frame, and side frames. It was time to move on to the window glazings. Now, some of the clear coat did splatter up on the window, and it doesn't look good, so I needed to address it. It didn't come off with any chemical cleaner, so I ended up moving to something more aggressive, which was polishing wheels. And you look at it and say, where do you get all those polishing wheels? Well, fellow modeler Larry suggested these. They're on glamazon.com for $14.99. And using some polishing compound that came with my Dremel, I apply it to the wheel and run the Dremel at a slow speed and just polish the entire window glazing. And here we have the end results. I must say I was very pleased with how these ended up turning out. And when Larry said,
You can polish anything.
well, he wasn't kidding. This worked out well.
Thanks, Larry. Jobs for ops. Engineers.
Continued.
The unit grain train is great because we have a lot of grain cars to move across the system. And with the unit grain train, well, those guys are obviously just picking up and dropping off hoppers. We do look at the Sioux turn. The Sioux turn is really just for the Wilmer guy. He has that come into his yard, drop cars, and then head out of his yard. So it's a very simple little turn, but it's a nice little job just to turn cars over in Wilmer. 35 and 36 are kind of a fun little train to run because the westbounds that are going along, they do nothing but pick up cars, and the eastbound that's coming out, all it does is drops off cars. So there isn't any swapping of cars. You're really just picking up and you're really just dropping off. And the last 3 jobs that we have are the M&S transfer, the Sioux transfer, and the Chicago Northwestern transfer. The M&S just runs a few industry jobs as well as just moves into Lyndale, drops off a few cars, and then heads back to its transfer tracks. The Sioux transfer and the Chicago Northwestern are both the same. They work themselves from their transfer yards into Union, get the cars they need, and then head back to their respective yards. That is the list of trains on the GN in 1970. If you have any interest in running on the main line, these are great jobs to take. There's a lot of variety, and it depends on what part of the session you might be involved in. But as you can see, you got a lot to pick from and a lot to enjoy. All right, we're at the reassembly phase, putting this thing back together. I'm not going to dive into the nitty-gritty details of putting a locomotive back together because in reality, the disassembly is just the opposite of assembly. So go reverse order from how you took it apart and you'll get it back together. This is a very well-designed locomotive by Rapido. I was very pleased with how well it came apart and how well it went together. I ended up getting it back together in about 45 minutes. A fellow modeler reached out to me and he was having an issue with a power pickup. So if you have a locomotive or an SW1200 that's not running great, I hope this video helps you at least maybe disassemble a locomotive enough to be able to fix that issue. Now, I know we shouldn't have to dive into a new locomotive and fix a problem, but if you run into an issue like we did of dull coating it, and that's not the manufacturer's fault, that was on us, we're going to repair that problem and go step by step. So when it really is all said and done, knowing the techniques of how to take a locomotive apart and then put it back together is kind of a key skill to be able to acquire as a modeler. Now, we're getting close to getting this thing finished and done, and once we do, we're going to take a look at it on the rails, a little before and after to give you an idea of what we started with, where we ended up, and in the end, coming up with those techniques that we shared throughout the season, from the weathering, the washes, and
This, that, and the other.
to be able to get it looking a little bit better. There is one detail part that I opted not to put back on the locomotive because, as you can see in this video here, I'm actually putting them on. They're the supports between the truck side frames, and one kept popping off every now and again, so I opted just to take them off completely because I don't need something like that landing in the middle of the rails, causing a derailment or an issue during an op session. So, easier just to take it off. We've come a long way since this day. We went from the disassembly to the reassembly to the weathering to the dull coating to cover up this dull coating. As incidents like that happen, I think the end results speak for themselves. It gives it that little bit of grit, little bit of grime. It was built in 1957, so 14 years old. The BN merger's happening. It's kind of neglected. I think it turned out all right. The locomotive's wheels were one of my favorite elements. Just painting that wheel side alone just adds that little extra flavor, that touch that makes it look a little bit more prototypical. So in the end, happy accidents. Had to tear this whole thing apart anyhow, so you might as well address some of those little details. And as you can see, little details go a long way. They really set the scene to make a locomotive look a little bit more realistic, and well, when it's on your railroad, it makes it a little bit more enjoyable. I don't know what the crew is doing here, but it looks like one guy's gotten a little ill. He's lost his lunch. One guy's going to have lunch, and the other guy's just ready to get out of here. Did you jump out of your chair and yell, "D, Dutch"?
Because you knew each end of the caboose had to take care of itself and the freight end side did not get a free ride, it had to pay for itself by bringing in revenue.
That ain't right.
Easy, Carl. He's just busting your marbles.
But it ain't right.
The real answer is B, Hutch. This caboose spent most of its life on the Hutchinson line, more commonly known as the Hutch line, running from Lyndale Yard to Hutchinson and back.
Hence, the Hutch caboose.
I'm glad they cleared it up, because that really messes with my ticker.
Modeler highlights, viewers and subscribers, you drive this bus.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Sue the Milwaukee Road. My name is William Sampson.
Well, look at that young buck.
Back in 2016 when I started this channel, I didn't think that I'd ever get to the point of creating nearly 70 videos where I've shared just different techniques and content that I've been able to experience. I enjoy the hobby. I record and put this stuff out for fellow modelers just like you. Anyone that thinks that the hobby is dying, I think it's actually just taking on a different form. The actual community itself has shifted a little bit more to an online setting where you can look at and see other railroads from the comfort of your own home. But the way that you can share the hobby with other people is to be able to just do simple things like click the like button. It doesn't take much. That's you sharing the hobby, and the more people that actually hit like, the more it will share with other people. You can even hit the dislike button.
But a like would be preferred.
Go ahead and hit share, and you can email it to a friend. I don't care how the content gets out there, as long as we're willing to share it with fellow modelers. And the other element is commenting. And you might say,
I don't have anything to say. There are no comments that are going to be of interest to you.
I enjoy things that are simple as, always enjoy your streams. Thank you.
That lets us know that the content was okay.
I appreciate you tuning in, Andy.
And I do try to respond back to each person that has left a comment. I don't care how crazy or weird the comment might be. It's entertaining for me, and hopefully it's entertaining for you. But if you hit the like buttons even on the comments, that's helping share the hobby as well. You can click into some of these guys and check out their channels because there's just more content that's being created by fellow modelers, and a lot of like-minded modelers are sharing within those comment sections. One of my favorite modelers is Tom Klomoski, and he's got a great video series if you like kind of more prototypical operations. He goes through how he uses his proto throttle and slows down operations. Simple things like that. It's a network and it's a spider effect that you can be able to crawl all over the interwebs and learn a lot of different things about a lot of different railroads simply by hitting the likes, hitting the comments, subscribing, and just doing your part.
In the clicking world.
You don't even have to do any modeling.
Boy, that's awfully easy.
So thank you for watching Sue the Milwaukee Road, and hopefully you'll join me for future episodes. Thank you. As we close out this season of the GN in 1970, what better than watch the Hutch Local pull in past that SW1200 that we finally complete. Those little hurdles and issues that you might run into as a model railroader, though they may happen, you want to find the ways to overcome them. I sincerely thank those that have watched videos all the way to the end, that hit the likes, comments, subscribe, and do all those things, because that is what shares the hobby. In the end, I just hope that you're finding some skills that you're able to attribute to your own railroad. And, well, what better to take us out of this final season than the locomotive that we
Kind of botched up.
Oh, we rescued it.
Let's see it roll out.
Remember to please like, tag, share, and follow, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And if you'd like to see the hobby grow, a simple click goes a long way.
Thanks for watching.
You done shoot about as good as you model.
Fellow modeler Tom asked the question, what do I like most about the hobby? Well, there's a lot of different answers to that one, and I'm going to say it's probably the ribbon and the jokes that you get between the guys that are talking about the hobby. Giving that old curmudgeon some material, you know what I mean? I probably got to say it's the people. That's the best thing about the hobby. And that's curmudgeon answering the question of the week.
Hopefully you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you want to see more, you can check out more episodes of the GN in 1970, as well as Sue the Milwaukee Road. You can see a tour of the GN in 1970 and even a few other layout tours. Nonetheless, check out the content and hopefully you enjoy that as well as future episodes. Thanks for watching.